Welcome to the Imbalance Podcast, a place where we navigate the struggles and perks of single mom life, the ebbs and flows of my work in the beauty industry, quality relationships, working through personal traumas, and finding our higher purpose. Sounds like a lot of struggling? Well, it is. So grab a drink and let's try and balance it together, because who said we have to navigate through this chaos alone? It has been over 120 days since Israel's repeated bombing, murdering, torturing, displacing, disseminating, and destroying of the people, the children, the animals, the land of Palestine. For some, this may be new news. To Palestinians, this is nothing short than the extension of the same annihilation and trauma that their ancestors forcibly went through. They have repeatedly been targeted by Israel and Zionist followers since before the Balfour Declaration in 1917. Western media, colonial mentality, and religious groups have painted this to be a political topic, something that we should table, needing more information on, or should disregard because it doesn't affect our everyday life. But this has certainly disrupted my thoughts, my emotions, and my actions, and I know many other conscious people all over the world share that same sentiment. No matter where we were born, what family we were born into, how we look, which religion we practice or don't practice, the world needs to stand up for each other and those who deserve the right to live, simply because we are all human and no race is more worthy to humanitarian rights than the other. This conversation that you are about to watch with one of my dearest clients, Aya, was something I wanted to have and to share with you all, in hopes that if you don't know anyone who has any ties to Palestine, maybe this could make it more personal to you. Enjoy, and permanent ceasefire now. Again, thank you for being here today. I was nervous asking you because I'm like, I don't know if she's going to want to talk about this on this setting, but you know, I knew I wanted to create a podcast for a while, and I was just like, it just doesn't feel right just coming out with some content about all the other, fun, bright stuff and not talking about what's really happening right now.
Right.
So what caught my attention again about Palestine, because I knew nothing about it other than your stories, was that the beautiful photos you would post when you went back home to your country last summer. So, what we couldn't see was the checkpoints, the surveillance, the years of brutality, and just all of the suffering. So I would love for you to just tell us some things that you witness whenever you go back to visit Palestine.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, I would say it all starts before you get into the country.
Mhm.
People who have a dual citizenship, like Palestinian American, for
Mhm.
example, they're not allowed to fly into the airport that's in Palestine. Personally, I only have an
Mhm.
American citizenship, so I'm able to do so. If you have a Palestinian citizenship, you have to fly to Jordan first, get to Jordan, and then you have to sit through a 3 to 4 hour bus ride, get to a checkpoint in Palestine, and that's how you get in. It's a whole process for people who have Palestinian citizenships. So like my dad, for example, every time he goes back home, that's what he has to go through. At the airport, it's really it's interesting because there's Arabs, Palestinians coming in, and then there's Jewish people also coming in.
Mhm.
Majority of them, I want to say, are Zionists. They, think that this is their land and that they have, birthright, and that
Mhm.
they're allowed to roam freely and do whatever they want. This is their home. So when you get to the airport, it's really obvious how segregated it is. Me and my family
Mhm.
get shoved on one side at Border Patrol and Customs.
Mhm.
Majority of Arab and Palestinian people sit there for hours, hours on end,
Wow.
getting questioned. They're asking you why you're here, where you're going, who your grandparents are. Why you care about my grandpa? He been dead for 12
Really?
years now. Why do you care? It's a test.
Right.
It's a test. They're trying to see if you lie to them. That way they have an excuse not to let you in. It's a game, right? And
Oh
then you
my
look over to
gosh.
your left side and you see all of these Zionists getting let in like it's nothing.
This perspective, I've never even thought about that. Like, I've never heard anyone talk about they talk about the checkpoints and everything moving around within Israel and Palestine, but I've never heard them talk about being in the airport.
Right. And so my family and like our home is in the West Bank. So in
Okay.
order to get to the West Bank, there are still checkpoints that you have to go through, right? And
Mhm.
honestly, I just kind of want to put this out there too. When you're traveling throughout any of the major cities in Palestine, you're going to have to go through a checkpoint. It's not like getting
Mhm.
from like Virginia to DC and then Maryland and you're just traveling one straight shot.
Freely. Yeah.
You're going to get stopped multiple times in multiple cities for multiple reasons, okay? And so when they stop you, they'll ask for your identification. They'll ask
Mhm.
for the reason for your trip. Again, they'll sometimes they'll push you off to the side in the car. They'll tell you to wait, and they'll take your passport and all your stuff, and they'll search, and then they'll come back and they'll search your car. Like what they're looking for, I don't know. I have no clue. But it's like I
Mhm.
just got off for example, again back to the airport thing. I just got off a 24-hour day of traveling. I'm trying to get home.
Right.
I already went through the
Right.
airport. I already went through security multiple times in multiple countries during all my layovers. What do you think that I have with me? What do you think that you're accomplishing by stopping me 1,000 times? And
Yeah.
most people, when they're traveling between these different cities, they're going to work, they're going to see family, you know,
Mhm.
they got things to
Mhm.
do. Nobody's smuggling anything. Nobody's on some bullshit the way that they think we are. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So it's just
Right.
it's totally unnecessary. And then there's, the cameras and the drones that they have everywhere. All the streets covered in cameras, okay? These cameras have facial recognition on them. They pick up who you are. They know who you are. With that, they'll find your social media. Through that, they'll figure out, oh, what are they saying about Israel? What are they saying? Are they how pro Palestine are they? Are they part of a terrorist group? What are they here to do? Like all of these things that
Wow.
play into each other. It's just it's you don't know unless you go there. You don't know unless you see it. You don't know unless you have family there who have been living under these types of conditions for their whole life. There's no privacy. There's no freedom of movement. There's no freedom of speech.
Yeah. That's why I felt like this conversation was so important. Like, I can talk in circles with other people about this all day, but knowing someone
Right.
who's actually been there, it's like that is the best source for us to understand, other than what we're seeing on social media. But it's like people are even seeing that on social media and they're like, there's no surveillance, or they don't have this and they don't have that. I'm like, why would anybody make these things up? And
Right. Like
I
it's
saw on
not
your story, yeah, and I saw on your story when you posted the checkpoint thing, like that one time. And I'm just like, so people have to go through that. Some people have to go through that every day.
yeah. Every single day. And like, if you have to be, sometimes people, if they have to be at work at 9 a.m., they're getting up at 4 a.m. because they don't know how long they're going to be stuck at this checkpoint for. They don't know what type of mood this soldier is going to be in who's either letting them in or telling them take your ass home.
Right.
Right. So it's just,
Right.
and they can choose to turn you away. They don't have any obligation to let you through. They can choose to turn you away and
Yeah.
tell you to go home.
It could just be a bad day for it. It's like airport security. Like
Yeah,
sometimes you get an asshole, sometimes you get people who just are like whatever.
exactly.
But, the livelihood of your job and your life should not be in the hands of like how someone feels that day. And again, that shouldn't even be why do we have to go through these checkpoints anyway? But, that's for people to do their history on. This isn't
Right.
even I'm not even gonna go there.
Right. Like if
Like
you're not if you
at
don't
this
if you're not
point,
educated at this point, then you're either living under a rock or you're insane. That's all I have to say.
exactly. Exactly. I agree. I agree. So, kind of reeling it back a little bit, being Muslim in America post 9/11. I know you were really young when that happened, but
Yeah.
do you remember any details or anything that surrounding how your family felt and how that correlates to what is happening right now?
Yeah. Like you said, I was really young when 9/11 first happened. I was actually born like a month later. So I was a baby, but unfortunately, this is a topic of discussion that's always kind of been in my family. And so I know a lot of the stories and I know a lot of the things that have happened to a lot of my family members. Like, for example,
Mhm.
we used to live in South Carolina. And I feel like without
Mhm.
having to go into detail, you can kind of get an idea of what the demographic there is like and like the culture. Um, and so my family used to be, they were business owners. They've always been business owners and they had a fine jewelry business. That was their last ever like business that they ever had. And my grandma would always tell me that after 9/11,
Mhm.
like even their regular customers that they had known for years, years on end, would call the store and start asking
Mhm.
them like, why are Muslims doing this? We're never gonna shop at your store again. You're all terrorists, this, that. And like, where are they getting this information from? They're getting it from CNN, Fox News, ABC
Yep.
News, all the stupid shit and all these like biased websites that they're reading from on the internet. And it's not factual. And
No.
like there's no basis to their claims. You know what I mean? And it's like
Right. It's
you've known.
fear.
Right, right. You like it's ignorance and it's
Mhm.
this ignorance is making people fearful for no reason because you've known these people for 10 plus years. You
Yep.
know, they've shown you hospitality, you give your money to them and then you hear something on the TV and all of a sudden your tune just changes. That doesn't make any sense to me, right? And like you can't just because let's say that there's one rotten apple in a basket, that doesn't mean all
Mhm.
the other apples are rotten too, right? There's bad people everywhere
Right.
you go. There's bad people no matter where you're from, what religion you are. Not every single person is good, but you cannot make a generalization and a stereotype based off of one person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And
And then it's like all those people, those clients, yeah, the clients that your parents had or your grandparents had, it's like, where does your loyalty lie? Like you said they were clients for 10 something years and then now you see again what they that is why it's so important that these freaking news outlets say the correct information, but they're not doing that. They're trying to create fear. And to your point, so I don't know, I had this conversation with your mom, but I actually
Mhm.
lived in South Carolina too when I was young. I grew up
Yeah.
there. And 9/11 happened. I was about in like, I think 5th grade or so, something like that.
Mhm.
And so I vividly remember coming home and I mean, I can never forget. I was just looking at the TV and all they were showing was just like the planes hitting over and over and over. And they were just saying, they were using like Osama bin Laden. And they were saying like, um,
Al Qaeda.
hijab, like they were yes, they were using all these words that I've never heard before, but
Mhm.
it was all geared towards Muslims, right? So it's like I saw it happening, but I wasn't like an ignorant person. I grew up in a household, in a mixed household anyway. So I'm
Right.
like, well, that sounds scary, but I'm not going to think like every person with a hijab on is doing this. But that is not how everybody's brain thinks though. Some people, that is what they saw and that might have been the only time they'd even they may not even know any Muslims, or anybody, and that's what they
Mhm.
see and that's what they think that's going on. And so I bring that up to say like how it correlates to now and when, after October 7th happened and then the attacks on Palestine, how
Right.
even in America there's been, a height in Islamophobia. Like again, there has been a height in Islamophobia, but
Mhm.
they seem to focus more on anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And that is the very frustrating part. It's like I'm sure there is a height in anti-Semitism, but there's also a height in Islamophobia.
Right.
So How do you think this hyper focus on anti-Semitism, but the lesser focus on Islamophobia, is dangerous for our society?
I mean, plain and simple, focusing on one group over another group of people belittles that other group of people that's not getting the focus. So, Muslims in
Right.
America, unfortunately, we are a minority. And like I said, growing up and because of the experiences that my family's had and I've had, you do feel pretty belittled in this country and like no one's backing you, right?
Right.
Fine, whatever. But what happened to all men are created equal?
Mm.
Like my life should not be less valuable than somebody else just because I worship God in a different way than they do. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's like the other point to bring up is what's been happening in Palestine since 1948 even. It's never been about religion. It's never been about religion. So the fact that the media takes Judaism and Islam and skews it and turns this into a conversation about the two religions being in conflict with each other. That's not the
Yeah.
case. Jewish people, Muslim people, and Christians, which, yes, there are Palestinian Christians, okay, they all coexisted for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
The problem was white supremacy.
Yes.
People, white European people who came into the country wanted their own land, wanted to take over, thought they were better than everybody else. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where everything went downhill. But again, the media is skewing it and turning it into the Muslims hate the Jews. The Muslims, are trying to get the Jews out of Palestine. That's not what's happening. It's not what's happening. And it's harmful because I'm
Yeah.
sure a lot of people have seen what has happened since October 7th here in the United States. A 6-year-old boy was stabbed 20 something times. Three guys in Vermont
Yep.
were shot because they were wearing a kufiya. And like
Mm-hmm.
for what? For what? There was what's it called? An imam outside of a mosque not too long ago. He was shot and killed. He wasn't even Palestinian. He was not even Palestinian.
And I mean, to that point, like that shows like why we have to stick together when you talk about white supremacy.
Yeah.
I have conversations like this with my sister all the time. We talk about like social constructs and like what the society has created for it to be like the normal standard, and we
Mhm.
just realize around the world these colonizers have made it to where it's like the whiter you are, that's more standard.
Right.
So that is so dangerous because that is why, like you said, this is happening. It's not necessarily because of religion. They're weaponizing religion. They're weaponizing their trauma and their pain that the Jewish people went through
Right.
and turning it around, and it's just so sick.
Another point that I like to touch on is we're not anti Semites. You know what I mean? Like, we're not anti Jewish people. It's anti
Right.
Zionism. We're anti Zionist because Zionists are the ones who are upholding this apartheid Israeli regime. There are countless Jewish people that I know and I have seen come out to these protests with us, post on social media in support of Palestine because their religion doesn't
Yes.
teach them to commit a genocide against people. Their religion doesn't encourage that. It's this political agenda and that people have taken, and it's kind of like, Israel's playing the victim card. That's how I like to put it. They're playing the
Mhm.
victim card, like, okay, this happened to
Mhm.
us, so we have a right to make it happen to somebody else.
Yep. But it's like, how does that doesn't make any sense. That's how trauma travels.
Yeah.
And the entire point is for us to help each other. If we're being oppressed by a group of people, it's like we have to overcome it together. And yeah, and I really commend like the Jewish people that are, there was like I think it was the Capitol. They got in the Capitol. They're locking hands and they're like getting arrested because they're
Yeah.
standing up for the Palestinians, because they're like, first of all, Israel is not about to act like all Jewish people
Support
think
this.
like that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So it's like because of what Israel is doing, in some ways, that is also creating some anti-Semitism towards Jewish people as well.
Yeah.
So, so I want to ask you, why is a two-state solution unacceptable?
I'm going to put it very plain and simple for you. Israel doesn't have a right to exist. And you might ask why. Why do I say that? One, Palestinians were on this land first, long before 1948, when the Zionists decided to come and take over. Again, Israel is an apartheid regime that was built
Mhm.
on stolen land. And I feel like now, especially after the current war on Gaza and the genocide that they've been committing over there, a two-state solution is never, ever, ever, ever going to be warranted or deserved. Never. Palestinians lost their homes. They lost their family members. They lost their friends. They lost their identity. The only thing they deserve is reparations. And the only way they can
Yeah.
get reparations is to have a free Palestinian country under a solely Palestinian rule. Period.
So many of us, including myself, have been so deeply moved by the Palestinian people, not only because of their perseverance, but also because of their deep rooted faith. What are some important things that you can share with us about the Islamic faith that have been misconceived by Western society?
I would say that Islam is a very peaceful religion and it teaches us, morals, it teaches us manners, it teaches us respect, it teaches
Mhm.
us how to be grateful and thankful. A Muslim lives their life kind of based off of their religion, and that's for a reason. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if you've ever looked into the Quran or read any part of it at all, but the Quran has never changed. Its teachings are very straightforward, very solidified teaching. And so it's I think it's very beautiful because we all have the same values. It doesn't matter where we're from.
Right.
It doesn't matter, what color our skin is. At the end of the day, we all believe in the same thing. We were all taught the same thing. Many of us grew up the same way. And I think a lot of people, they might, because of, again, the things that they see on the internet and on the news and whatever, they might think Islam is oppressive, for example. Like, why do women have to wear a hijab on their head? Why
Yeah.
do you guys have to pray 5 times a day? Why can't you guys drink alcohol? Why do you guys have to fast every year for 30 days? But all of these things have a reason behind them. If you look into what
Mhm.
fasting does for your body, it's actually a really good thing. And even doctors who are not
Mhm.
Muslim recommend it to their patients to do it because of how beneficial it is for you. The hijab, for example, it's a way to preserve your modesty and to protect you. It's not oppressive and, a way of God not letting you show your beauty or something by covering your hair. You know what I mean? And so
Right.
with that being said, um I would say that we always believe that God has a reason for things. And after tragedy, something good will always come afterwards. We don't consider any type of hardship that we face a punishment, but rather a blessing because in our religion, we believe that God will never ever burden you with more than what you can handle. And in terms of
Mhm.
the Palestinians and just Muslims in general, like the reason why I would say that a lot of them are very resilient and handling everything that's going on with such grace is because we know that death is not the end for us. The teachings of our
Yeah.
religion tells us that individuals who, for example, have been killed by Israel, they're considered martyrs. And dying a martyr is one of the most honorable ways to die. So that's why you see a lot of these women and men and grandparents in these videos that are coming out of Gaza thanking God, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, their grandchild just got killed in front of them, but they're thanking God because they know that something better is coming for them. Maybe not in this
Mm.
life, but in the afterlife for sure.
Yeah, that is so like real, so deep. And that is something that when I first started following what's happening and seeing the videos, that really moved me and even confused me. I was so hurt by what I was seeing, but then they would say, thank God for that they were martyred. And I'm just like, okay, well, if they have that faith, then I have to have it too. Thank you for sharing that because that is very important. And your mom sent me the recommendation of a type of Quran to read, and I actually bought it and I have been reading it.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, and I'm trying to take my time.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
But it is very, I think, like you said, you said like soft religion. It's not what they have put into our heads. It's not oppressive. It truly, and the thing is too, it's like you have the choice how modest you want to be,
Mhm.
and you have the choice to make that decision for yourself. So,
Right, like,
thank you.
I'm not wearing a hijab, but, like, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me. That doesn't make me less
Right.
Muslim than somebody else. You know what I mean?
I know you were following the ICJ hearings, and I kind of need to brush up on exactly what it means, but I am aware that it doesn't hold any type of like judicial weight or anything like that.
Mhm.
So, I just, from your perspective, why is what happened at the ICJ hearings important for our future?
Um, it's really important because this is one of the first times that Israel has been called out for its illegal occupation and its brutality against Palestinians, and not just in an international forum, but at all, really.
Wow.
Um, Israel is being accused of committing a genocide against Palestinians. And like you said, even though this holds no judicial weight, meaning that like no one can really enforce any of the rulings onto Israel, the hearings at the ICJ, in my opinion, are a gateway for one, Palestinian liberation, and two, the liberation of other occupied countries.
Mhm.
It shows that even powerful apartheid regimes like Israel, they're not above international law. They don't get to just do whatever they want as they please.
Right.
Somebody will hold them accountable.
Sometimes the smallest steps will lead us towards liberation, and I mean, we can contest to that with certain things that happen in our country.
Right.
So I hope this is something that will be able, to lead to other things to stop them and what they're doing.
Yeah.
From all the images I've seen of Palestine, it seemed like such a beautiful and serene place. But for the past 100 and something days, the images that have been circulating of Palestine have been nothing but despair, disturbing, devastating, to say the least. So, can you share with us the beautiful things that you would want people to know about your country and what Palestine once was?
Yeah. Um, I think I said this before, but it was once a land where, all types of religions coexisted with each other very peacefully. The streets were, and these are things that I have always heard from my family. Unfortunately, because I never lived there, but the
Mhm.
streets were always so full of life. Children were able to roam freely, play wherever and whenever they pleased. Just like a child should. Um, Back in the day, it's illegal now, but we were actually able to display our flag out in the streets and in public. We can't do that anymore.
Mhm.
Um, People just live their day to day. If you, in my opinion, like people think that America is all about the nightlife and this and that. Y'all have never been to the Middle East. Y'all have never been to the Middle East. They do it differently over there, okay? And yeah,
Yeah. I believe you. And even other parts of the world in general, like they'll be up till sunrise and they won't stop actually. Like
yeah.
I know some Spanish countries are like that and even, places in Europe. So whenever I do catch like videos of, something that like Motaz might post or Bisan or
Mhm,
whomever, it's like
mhm.
it looked so beautiful. It looked like I love Mediterranean food. So I feel like The food looks good. I'm a tea drinker. It looks like you guys always have some tea.
Yes, tea is a big, big part of our culture. Tea with mint. Tea with mint or sage, that's like top tier Palestinian like cultural drink. You have to have it like that.
No, I love it. I love it. So, for those who, I mean, we've been hearing about Gaza and then the West Bank. So, can you share like how they're different and what's going on in the West Bank versus what's going on in Gaza?
The West Bank is controlled by what we call the Palestinian Authority. It's
Okay.
the Palestinian government, basically.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, this Palestinian Authority is kind of in cahoots with Israel. So any
Mm.
type of like resistance or, you know, people wanting to kind of speak out or act out against the apartheid comes with consequences. People are faced with arrest, death, all these things for fighting for justice in their own land. And like I said, it's because the Palestinian Authority is basically in Israel's back pocket. Israel doesn't, it's not in their interest to go and cause as much destruction as they have in Gaza, because Gaza, on the other hand, the Palestinian Authority and their rule, it's not as prevalent over there. And I would
Right.
say it's due to the fact that there are resistance groups like Hamas that have been able to kind of slowly create their own like rules and regulations, and these don't coincide with Israel's interests at all, not politically, not financially, none of that. And of course, Israel doesn't like that. So,
Right.
what are they going to do? They're going to get rid of that. And I don't say this to belittle what's happening in the West Bank, because it is still violent over there. You know, there are cities
Mhm.
such as Jenin and Nablus, they frequently get bombed too. That, you know, Israel
Right.
has used airstrikes on them on multiple occasions, and there are over 10,000 political hostages in prison in the West Bank, and many of them are children being held without charge or trial or an attorney. It's bad on both sides, but that's the reason why Gaza has gotten to this point.
Right. Because there seems to have been more resistance. And um I actually started listening to the 100 Years War on Palestine, Rashid Khalidi. Um I highly recommend people listening to that, because what we can't give you right now, because I'm not a historian, he breaks down, the 100 years before, like how this even came about, how this even happened, just like you're
Yeah.
speaking about the Palestinian government in the West Bank in cahoots with
Mhm.
Israel. Some might be thinking like, well, what's up with that? Well, if you read this book, you'll understand like how all of this stuff was created. What they did is divide and conquer. So it's like they want to weaken a group of people by dividing them and dividing their government so they can
Mhm.
conquer them. That's what Israel is doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I definitely recommend people reading that, because they further explain exactly what you're talking about right now. As redundant as this question is, for those who are listening and watching, what are some actions that people can take to get us closer to a free Palestine?
First and foremost, I would say come out to as many protests as you can make it to. I'm sure everyone's heard this multiple times, but we are stronger in numbers. The second
Yes.
thing, call your senators, call your congressmen, demand a ceasefire. If you don't know what to say, if you don't know how to reach these people, there are a lot of good resources and scripts, even that you can find on Instagram. You can find, honestly, if you just look it up on the internet, there's so many resources that you can come across that can kind of guide you in this process. Another thing I would say is get involved with your local activism groups for sure.
Mhm.
Not only will it help educate you, but again, we're stronger in numbers.
Yeah.
Wear symbols of solidarity, such as a kufiya or your cute little hoodie, um, and then donate to humanitarian efforts on the ground in Gaza. And you can also donate things like eSIMs, which will allow people in Gaza to get cellular service on their phones so that they can communicate, number one, with their family, friends, whoever, and two, so that they can keep providing us with updates and keep providing us with footage. And lastly, just keep posting, keep bringing awareness to what's going on. A lot of people are like, well, what does it matter? Like, my followers already know what's going on. Who cares? Why do I need to keep posting? A lot of the footage that's been posted on Instagram was actually used in the ICJ hearings when they were trying to
Mm.
convict Israel of committing genocide in Gaza. So even the littlest thing is not as insignificant as some people may think.
I know my followers are probably like, okay, but my point is like make people uncomfortable enough to maybe do something.
Yeah.
Like I may have posted every day since, the past 120 days about it, but maybe someone's tired of me posting about it and then they go look it up and then they go do something that's going to make them feel more liberated, or you know what I'm saying? That's how I feel. So although it's like we can't go over there and literally stop Israel and what they're doing, we can, like you said, bring awareness. We can learn more. This can get people to become activists who
Yeah.
never cared about any of this stuff before. I went to Busboys and Poets when Linda Sosor, I
Sarsour.
think is her name.
Yeah.
Yes,
Linda Sarsour.
yes, when she spoke, and the amount of people that came was so great to see. It felt so good. And then the protests, like when you look at the pro-Palestinian protests, you see people from everywhere there, from any place, any ethnicity. You see children, you see everybody there,
Mm-hmm.
and that should tell you something as well. Like we just
Absolutely.
want to be free. We're not free until we're all free. But yeah, keep still boycott Starbucks. It
Absolutely.
wasn't, but Starbucks, not buying
Mm-mm.
it.
McDonald's, do not even go there. Do not eat their plastic shitty ass food.
Don't do
Disney,
it.
Hulu, Dunkin', Walmart. Just look at that.
All
Look at
of
that
it.
BDS list, please. Just look at the
Just
BDS
put your
list.
money somewhere else,
Exactly.
in better
Yeah.
places.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here and doing this with me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was, I don't want to say fun because I feel like that's a little bit, I don't know, maybe doesn't fit the circumstance that we're talking about, but it's nice to be able to kind of
Right.
speak about this and have my voice heard, especially with someone like you who has a platform that you do, and like you said, maybe a lot of your followers don't really know what's going on.
Let's stay connected. You can find me on Instagram at imbalanced with cat or on my website imbalancedpod.com. Give me a follow or a podcast review and I'd love to share it on air. Thanks again for listening. Hope you enjoyed this show.